New reports are talking about how Taika Waititi is being courted for a Star Wars movie. Let's talk about what movie he might do and what the fans are saying about the possibility of a Taika Waititi Star Wars movie on the silver screen. What's going on, everybody? It's Josh. Welcome back to the channel. Do me a favor and smash that like button and let's get right into it. Oh, and real quick, Marvel fans, tonight on this channel at around 5:30 Eastern Standard Time, I'm going to be live streaming with Charles Murphy, notorious MCU scooper Charles Murphy. I'm going to ask him all the questions about Phase 4. We'll get really nerdy and sweaty tonight, so come on by for that. Now, this actually broke on The Hollywood Reporter. The Hollywood Reporter came out with this scoop yesterday. The internet was abuzz coming from The Hollywood Reporter. We can trust that it's probably likely, but it's important to note here that what they are reporting is that he is being courted, that he was approached to develop a Star Wars project, not that he's confirmed to be doing a Star Wars movie or anything like that. So he's simply in talks and was approached to develop a movie. Now, the Hollywood Reporter then goes on to talk about how they're unaware of whether or not this would be the same movie that Kevin Feige would be producing in the Star Wars universe or not. They talk about how he had great success on The Mandalorian with that last episode, and of course being IG-11, and it put him in the same universe or the same sphere as Jon Favreau. Now, it's important to note here, there are a lot of rumors that Jon Favreau will either be taking some kind of a leadership position on the creative side for Lucasfilm in the future of Star Wars, or he might even be literally taking over as the president of Lucasfilm for Kathleen Kennedy. But either way, we know that Jon Favreau is likely to play an important role in the creative future for Star Wars. Now, it's also worth mentioning that Taika Waititi did put a post out on Twitter today that had the Fleetwood Mac Rumors record title, the cover art for that record. And so people were saying, oh, that's got to mean something. And it does mean something. I think, frankly, it means that there's more to it than people are thinking. Like, I don't think he would have said anything if there was no truth to it whatsoever, right? I just think that that's the move, right? If it's total bullcrap and he doesn't want people's anticipation to be sparking up or whatever like that, I feel like he would either say nothing or say something to squash it. Him saying this, putting this tweet out there, it's just a little bit of that Taika flavor, man. So I do believe that this is true enough, and I mean, I guess it's kind of up to Lucasfilm and Taika to decide how that would all work. So that's the official word out there coming from the Hollywood Reporter, and then Taika says that thing. So I think he's at least being courted. Whether or not he'll say yes is a totally another story. But you know, the thing that was really interesting about this is, like, how do fans feel about this exactly? Because there was one person I thought of immediately when this was announced, and that would be executive producer Tara Zahn. Okay, now Tara is awesome. She's a great nerd, but she's also not a fan of Taika Waititi at all. Like, at all. Like, she's just, I thought of her immediately. I was like, there's no way she'll be into this. And we did talk about this on the Den of Nerds Live earlier today. Executive producer Ryan H. and myself sat down and talked with a bunch of fans and just each other about what we think of it. And while there were many people in the chat that were excited about the prospect of a Taika Waititi Star Wars movie, there were more than a few that were not into it. And a lot of people said that his brand of humor runs kind of counter to what they would want or expect in a Star Wars movie. If you look at the 8th episode of The Mandalorian, that opening scene with the two biker troopers and their conversation and that whole thing, that's very Taika Waititi. That is his flavor, and there were several Star Wars fans, many in fact online, that were not exactly thrilled with that opening scene. And I think that, frankly, fans are much more excited about the prospect of maybe Jon Favreau himself directing a Star Wars movie, or Deborah Chow. Deborah Chow is the standout director from the first season of The Mandalorian. She just has perfect sensibilities. A lot of people are saying she should get a movie, but the problem with that is that Deborah is already doing the Obi-Wan series, and so she'll have to do the Obi-Wan series before she does anything for the silver screen. But Taika is also doing Thor: Love and Thunder, which is said to drop in 2021. And so, guys, like, the plain truth here is, I don't think there's enough time for Taika to do that film, Thor: Love and Thunder, for the MCU, and then turn around and do a Star Wars movie for the 2022 movie. And so, even though Taika is likely being approached for this film, we don't know for sure in which movie it would be, but it seems like it would have to be the 2024 movie or the 2026 movie. There's a couple other things we got to talk about here. There's this concern with fans particularly when we hear that Feige is indeed coming over to be doing a Star Wars movie. And when we hear some of the stuff about how they're not doing a trilogy and they want to sort of do a series of movies more like the MCU, there are a lot of fans out there that are concerned. They do not want Star Wars to become Marvel. And I always tell you guys, the reason I'm excited for Kevin Feige to do a Star Wars movie is not because I want him to come over and do a Marvel version of Star Wars. Marvel and Star Wars are very different brands. And I think Star Wars movies really need to be ceremonial. They need to be very deep. They need to be mythic. They have to have that mythology, that sense of adventure. They can be fun and have funny jokes and things like that. But, you know, if you look at something like The Last Jedi, some of those jokes in that movie were criticized as being too Marvel-y. They feel a little too Marvel-y, and honestly, they remind me a lot of the James Gunn humor from some of the Guardians of the Galaxies and the Thor Ragnarok humor from Taika Waititi. Now, on the flip side of that, one of the things that excites me about Taika possibly doing a Star Wars movie is the fact that he knows how to work within systems and build content that works in the macro, right? So Thor Ragnarok, despite being a very different movie than a lot of the MCU, still fits into the MCU. It feels like it belongs, and it leads us to a place that it needs to get to. I'm damn sure that Feige was like, hey, you can do all this, but we need you to end here. We need you to do this, this, and this for the Hulk character. And Taika was able to take those mandates and still do a really creative thing with that film. Likely, Star Wars is going to have a new vision, a new direction, and hopefully have a freaking plan for where it wants to go and how it wants these movies to connect. And Taika represents the perfect type of creative person that can come in and play ball, set things up the way you need them to be set up, you know, a la the MCU, but then have his own creative freedom with it. He can still put his stamp on it and make it a really fun ride. But I guess what I mean to say is, and I sort of talked about this in the live stream, is I would really like to see Taika work within someone else's system with someone else's vision on the macro, because I don't really want him to be the one that's sort of deciding the future of Star Wars. I don't want Taika Waititi to come in and be like, this is what Star Wars is now. But if, you know, Luminous is really this thing they're setting up properly, which will lead into the High Republic, and that is the plan, then I do trust Taika to come in and work under people that have that plan and that are going to cater to that plan and still do his own thing. I think in that sense, yes, he is very good with it, but I don't want to see him come in and be the creative force of this new mythos for Star Wars. That's where I think the sequel trilogy got into some trouble. Now, if he does indeed work on the Kevin Feige Star Wars movie, that will alleviate a lot of my concerns immediately, because Feige is a big vision type dude. He's the dude that everybody respects. And frankly, if Feige tells Taika, like, hey, do this, this, and this, Taika's gonna freaking do it. Like, you know, I just watched the Robert Downey Jr. podcast that he did on Rogan, and it was so cool, like, the reverence that he had for Feige and the way he speaks about Feige. He's like, we all just do what Feige says, basically. Even that dude who's making $50 million a movie, you know, Robert Downey Jr., he still just does what Feige says, and Feige and his team are the geniuses there. They're the creative force, right? So I just found that really interesting, and I think if he does get tied to a film with Feige, that will be all around good for fans. But even if that doesn't happen and Jon Favreau is elevated, I mean, he did just work within Jon Favreau's world for The Mandalorian and did deliver a great finale. Like, even if you're not crazy about that first scene, that finale is fire, dude. That finale is great. And so in that sense, yeah, I would be excited for a Taika Waititi Star Wars movie, and I'd be excited. I would be less concerned about it because his humor concerns me, right? His humor, his craziness, he's a little full of himself, he's a little big for his britches. It's great, but you need reined in when you're working on these type of franchises. That's what didn't happen with the sequel trilogy thus far. We can't make that mistake again, right? So I would be excited that for him to do the Star Wars movie, and I would be less concerned than I am now if Jon Favreau is in charge of the plan. If Kevin Feige is producing the movie, if those kind of things are going on, I'm much less concerned. But that's my thoughts, guys. That's sort of the news out there. I want to know what you think about this. Are you excited for Taika Waititi Star Wars? Are you concerned about a Taika Waititi Star Wars? Whatever you're thinking about Taika Waititi Star Wars, let me know in the comment section below. And now let's shout out Help Me Find My Keys. Indeed, Hulkling's first appearance was Young Avengers #1. So So shout out to you, help me find my keys. And now let's ask another nerd card question before we get out of here. I want to know what movie over at Warner Brothers also has Taika Waititi attached to it despite it being delayed. I personally think this could be a big reason that Disney just wants to keep offering Taika all these awesome films so he doesn't go over and make that movie for Warner Brothers. But the question remains, what is that movie over at Warner Brothers that Taika is attached to? And again, I want to remind you guys, tonight at 5:30 Eastern Standard Time, we are sitting down with Charles Murphy. Drop a question, man. Tweet a question at us. Drop a question here you want me to ask Charles on this video. We're going to be pulling from questions all over to do some Q&A. So come on by for that live stream. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.